If you Falling Star Kiana, when exactly do you have to pay for the deflect costs? Can you stun a stunned unit? Do you reckon you know the rules to Riftbound Origins? We are going to put you to the test. Today we're going through 12 scenarios at 3 difficulty levels in this episode of...
Perhaps now you'll read your data sheets.
If you'd like to jump to any difficulty level or want to revisit any questions, timestamps are in the description. Hidden Blade. You control both battlefields and have a hidden blade hidden at one of them. Your opponent moves their Mind Splitter into the other battlefield and initiates a combat showdown. Can you use your hidden blade to kill the Mind Splitter? No. If you have a hidden spell or a hidden permanent that chooses targets, they must choose from amongst the options at that battlefield. The exception to this is if an ability is worded in such a way that that's impossible, for example Tide Turner. Also note that Zhonya's Hourglass is commonly misunderstood. It doesn't choose a target, and gears cannot exist at battlefields. So when a unit at a battlefield dies, you can reveal a hidden Zhonya's Hourglass at either battlefield to save it. Ravenbloom Student. You have a Ravenbloom Student at a battlefield and a Consult the Past hidden there. Your opponent moves a Shipyard Skulker into the battlefield. You react by playing your Consult the Past. Does your Ravenbloom Student receive the increase in might and trade? Yes. The full text of Hidden dictates that you play the card when you reveal it, not when you hide it. Hiding a card is not playing a card. Consult the Past. It is your turn. You have a Vanguard captain at a battlefield. You hide your Consult the Past there. Can you then immediately reveal and play Consult the Past to draw 2 cards? No. You may only play the card at the beginning of your next turn. The value will just have to wait. Sprite Mother. You play a Sprite Mother and move your sprite with temporary into a battlefield, conquering it and scoring up to 7 points. You hide your Teemo Scout there at the battlefield and pass the turn. Your opponent, completely bricked, and plays nothing during their turn. So when the turn passes to you, do you have an opportunity to play your Teemo before the sprite dies? Yes. The part of the temporary keyword that causes your unit to die is considered a triggered ability. Triggered abilities go on the chain and give you an opportunity to play reactions such as hidden cards. You can reveal your hidden Teemo Scout, putting him onto the battlefield, and then your sprite will die. Then you will score your 8th point by holding the battlefield and win the game. Eclipse Herald. You have an Eclipse Herald at a battlefield. Your opponent moves a Cadragoran the Infernal in and initiates a combat showdown. You respond with Rune Prison, stunning it and increasing your Eclipse Herald's might to 8. You hold a second Rune Prison in hand. Are you able to play it on the Cadragoran and stun it again, increasing your Herald's might to 9 and killing it in combat? No. Stunning is considered a binary state. If a unit is stunned during this turn, it cannot be stunned again. Unfortunately, Eclipse Herald will have to gently tap the Cadragoran before it timidly returns back to your opponent's base. Hextech Ray. You move your Shipyard Skulker into a battlefield. Your opponent plays Hextech Ray, targeting your Skulker. You respond with Flash to move your unit back to base. Does your unit die? No. Hextech Ray and other similar spells require the unit to be at the battlefield in order to resolve. If this requirement is not met, the spell will not resolve. Pretty handy effect to have at reaction speed. Luckily, Flash is a readily accessible card that most people can get their hands on for an affordable price. Falling Star. Your opponent has a Kiana at a battlefield and no units at base. You have no units anywhere. That Kiana needs to go, so you cast Falling Star. Your opponent reacts to the spell by casting Call to Glory, increasing her might to 7. Do you have to pay the 2 power for Kiana's deflectability? No. Falling Star creates 2 reflexive triggers, so there will be 2 instances of choosing Kiana. Deflect is a mandatory additional cost on spells and abilities that choose the object with Deflect, but this cost being mandatory does not apply to triggered abilities and therefore reflexive triggers. If your opponent had waited until Falling Star had resolved, the 2 reflexive triggers would try to go on the chain. At that point they would have to decide whether to pay the deflect cost or not in order for the triggers to go on the chain in the first place. In the end, your opponent has given you a chance not to recycle 2 runes by mistiming their call to glory. Vayne. Your opponent has a shipyard skulker at a battlefield. You play Vayne, which enters ready since your opponent controls a unit at a battlefield. You move your Vayne in, initiating a combat showdown. At any point during this sequence of events, does your opponent have an opportunity to gust your Vayne back to your hand? No. Vayne's first ability, which allows her to enter ready, is a conditional passive ability and does not put anything on the chain. Next, Vayne moves into a battlefield. The act of moving does not put anything on the chain. As Vayne has moved into an occupied battlefield, a combat showdown will begin. You become the attacker, and therefore Vayne becomes the attacker, and focus during this combat then begins with you. Once you pass focus, that will be the first opportunity your opponent will have to play a reaction. Unfortunately, Assault will give the Vayne a +3 might buff as soon as she is given the designation of attacker, so the shipyard skulker will be condemned to death. Imperial Decree. Your opponent has 3 Deadbloom Predators at a battlefield. You have 3 recruits at base. You play Imperial Decree and move all 3 recruits into the battlefield. Do you kill all of their pesky Deadblooms? No. During the combat damage step, you must assign lethal damage to one unit before moving on to the next. This does not take into consideration abilities that would cause any point of damage to become lethal, such as Imperial Decree. So, unfortunately, your 3 recruits will violently kill 1 Deadbloom Predator, while the other 2 look on, horrified, wondering where they went wrong in life. What choices led them down this dark road. Reaver's Row. You have a Vanguard captain at Reaver's Row. Your opponent moves his Yasuo Remorseful into the battlefield, activating his move trigger, which will now deal his might in damage to your unit. Are you able to move your unit back to base using Reaver's Row before it dies? Yes. This question asks what happens when multiple triggered abilities controlled by different players trigger simultaneously. When this happens, starting with the player whose turn it is and proceeding in turn order, the players put their triggered abilities on the chain. As it's your opponent's turn, their Yasuo ability will go on the chain first. Then, Reaver's Row ability, which is controlled by you. Chains resolve with the newest item on the chain resolving first, or first in, last out. So, the Vanguard captain will bravely and tactically return to your base. Then, as Yasuo no longer has a target for his ability, it will not resolve, although Yasuo will now conquer unimpeded. Recruit the Vanguard. You have a Soaring Scout at a battlefield. Your opponent moves a Shipyard Skulker in, starting a combat showdown. You play Recruit the Vanguard when you are given focus. Your opponent reacts by casting Gust on your Soaring Scout. Are you able to play your 4 recruits to the battlefield? Yes. If you no longer control a unit at a battlefield after it becomes contested, your opponent will only gain control of the battlefield during the resolution step of combat, when the contested state of the battlefield is cleared. In any other situation, if you no longer control a unit at a battlefield, control of the battlefield is immediately lost. Call to Glory. Your Vanguard captain has a buff and is currently sitting at a battlefield. Your opponent casts Void Seeker on your Vanguard captain, marking 4 damage on him. Then your opponent moves his Lecturing Yordle into the battlefield and initiates a combat showdown. You have a Call to Glory in your hand, but all your runes are exhausted. Can you use the alternative cost of Call to Glory, removing the buff off the captain, and increase its might to 7 before it dies to the marked damage? No. A cleanup will occur after the Call to Glory goes on the chain, as removing the buff was part of playing the spell and not part of the resolution of the spell. During cleanup, the Vanguard captain will die from the damage, now equaling its might value. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned something, and if you have any burning rules questions, please leave them in the comment section. Otherwise, have a good one, like and subscribe, see you in the next video.